Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second in a four-part series of webinars organised by Teachers for Palestine. The last night, thank you to everybody who participated and who enjoyed the conversations last night. We spoke last night to two lifelong activists. Tonight, we're going to shift focus slightly, and we're going to be speaking to three voices from Gaza and a lad from Belfast, all of whom have been witnesses to the horrible, to the genocide, to the deplorable actions of the Israeli state in Gaza and in the West Bank. We're going to be focusing slightly on the issue of scholasticide. That's because we've got a number of very distinguished speakers. First of all, we've got Abu Bakr, who's a 22-year-old journalist from Gaza and an eyewitness to the genocide. He's going to be followed by Dalia Al-Najjar, and Dalia Al-Najjar is someone who has an enviable record in third level education. She is a degree to the hilt, and she is the founder and director of the Razan Al-Najjar Bursary, which is what she's currently doing now. And she's going to be speaking a little bit about loss, and she's going to be speaking about grief. We really appreciate her bravery and her having her time here this evening. We're then going to be speaking to Professor Wahid Al-Modal, who is a professor of political studies and international professor of politics and international studies, in the erstwhile University of Gaza. And finally, then we'll be talking to Jake, who many of you will have followed his social media account. He's recently been over in the West Bank, and he's been able to relate really well and communicate really well the situation in the West Bank for ordinary Palestinians to people back at home here in Belfast and beyond. So we all remember in the early days of the genocide, the absolutely bewildering but not surprising scenes of Israeli military commanders gleefully detonating and blowing up and exploding universities all across Gaza. There's no longer any third level education system left in Gaza, and it's quite obviously not an attack on any military structures within Gaza. It's an attack on the concept of education and the concept of learning, and it lets us who are teachers know that the intention behind this genocide is not defense or not ennoble or not about the protection of Israel's own people. It's about the destruction of a way of life for another people. And we're going to be getting more of an insight into that tonight from our guests. So without further ado, I'd like to pass over to my colleague, Michelle Hayes, who's going to introduce our first speaker tonight. So thank you.
You are muted.
Hello, everyone. Dave, Salaam alaikum. Welcome, everybody. Ahlan. And tonight, we're introducing, Sean's done a very good job of introducing everyone already, but next in line is Abu Bakr, a very humble man who said, just introduce me as a journalist who's 22 years old. But if you get a chance, there's a beautiful sentence that he has from a recent podcast, and he said, our hope is a reflection of your hope. And I suppose this is very indicative of Palestinians, so appreciative of anything that we do, when in actual fact, it's us that are learning about humanity and what it's like to be human from the Palestinians. A big price they've had to pay for this. So Abu Bakr, as we know, what's happening in Gaza right now is the deliberate and intentional destruction of every facet of life. And here as Teachers for Palestine, we're asking Abu Bakr to explore the scholasticide currently happening in Gaza and the destruction of education in the West Bank. Jake will come to later, but Abed's message is one of resilience, and that hope is essential, and people must actively resist silence and complicity. So we fight for change, and Abu Bakr, welcome, Ahlan, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here and giving me the chance to speak. And I absolutely appreciate your efforts for doing something really great in support of Palestinian teachers. It means a lot personally and for so many, make sure of that. This is a truly significant topic, the one that you're talking about, and given the fact that I'm a student and I'm still a student, I haven't completed my studies. I should have completed my studies back in 2023, but because of the genocidal campaign that Israel started in Gaza in October 2023, I was deprived of this lifetime moment. So this quality side has many aspects to talk about. First and foremost, we know from the international organizations and the investigative reports that have been held inside the besieged territory that over 87% of schools have been destroyed by the Israeli war machine during the genocide, throughout the genocide, and this number is of course expected to rise because the genocide is still ongoing. At the same time, 625,000 students have been deprived of their education, and they kind of resumed their education during the 6-week ceasefire. But unfortunately, that was a very fragile ceasefire that Israel shattered, and then it continued its genocide. So all of them are now not studying because they don't have the means. Apart from that, Israel has killed nearly 10,000 students in Gaza, including students of universities, colleges, high school students, younger students, whoever from these schools and universities. And by the recent stats, Israel has also killed hundreds of teachers in Gaza and hundreds of university professors as well. And one of the prominent voices, of course, is the one that whom you all know is Professor Rafat al-Arair and others as well. So it's a huge tragedy what Palestinians have been going through. And because we all know, you might not know, I'm not sure, but Gaza has one of the highest rates of literacy in the whole world. The education there was inspiring and was a very, very prosperous for the entire population. So when we mention this, this part of the genocide, we talk about huge losses, particularly for the children and what they have been going through, because Israel has always deliberately been targeting the school system inside the Strip, the educational system. It has been killing, the finest, Gaza's finest. It has been trying to suppress the voices of these teachers and these students. So I don't know what to tell you, to be honest, but no one has been trying to do anything in support of this. Even, the local teachers try to do, some sort of, to try to set up some mobile schools or tinted schools or something to try and do something or repair something on the damage that has been unleashed on the population. But unfortunately, that couldn't work out, because when we look at the children right now who should have been in schools and who should have been taking their education as simply as all other students all across the globe, they have a different story. I've been here in Ireland for the past 2 weeks, and I've seen students going to their schools and, going back home and having their education and talking to their teachers, etc. But the case now for the students, and for the past 580 days, more than 580 days, has been like that those students don't have the time to study, don't have the time to even go through, dig deep into their books or to meet their teachers, because they have a tragedy to to alleviate, because every single day, they don't have time to even study, because those children, young children, are either forced to labor because they have to work, because their families have been wiped out. So they have, they just have to queue up in long queues, because that's something I've seen very regularly over time during my experience in Gaza. So they have been waiting for long hours in long queues under the sun and under the bombardments to get a sip of water, or to probably obtain a plate of food. But so how can the children have this kind of time or freedom to continue their education. The same for their teachers. And tinted schools are not a conducive environment to study or, to really build something for these students. A lot of students have been frustrated by the continuity of the genocide. A lot of the students, their families have been wiped out. They have lost a lot of their neighbors, a lot of their family members, and they don't have anyone to even rely on. So they are multitasking at one point. So this aspect, or the aspects of this tragedy, are absolutely unbearable, and something that we can talk about for hours, many, many hours, or maybe for days without even stopping, because it is really devastating. It is really beyond unimaginable. And like, what can you do if 87%, over 87% of the schools are destroyed? Such sorts of initiatives may really help, the one that you're doing, particularly for the children. But as Israel continues targeting the communications infrastructure, continues targeting everyone, the conditions, the fact that Israel has rendered Gaza as hellish, is making everything impossible. But this is a very, very important thing to mention, because Israel is trying to raise the fact that Gaza has a high, very high, and exceptionally high literacy rate. And we're seeing right now how the children's lives have been transformed, which is absolutely heartbreaking.
One of the points I suppose that you raise, Abu Bakr, is the high literacy rates. And I suppose there's a lot of parallels even between the Irish and the Palestinians in terms of how we value education. And I suppose I'd just like to bring people's attention to, who are also listening to, the UN Charter Rights of the Child. It is a right to education. They have a right to safety. They have a right to, et cetera, et cetera. So, for teachers that are listening, that's a lovely lesson to do, just to visit, the convention, that charter, the UN Charter Rights of the Child.
I think also, Michelle, one of the stories that I vividly remember was that of a 10-year-old child. I remember his name. His name was Mohammed al-Nabahin. He was only 10 years old. And he told me one day, like, I met him accidentally in front of his tent in one of the largest tented camps in the besieged territory, particularly in Deir al-Balah. And he was sitting on the street and selling his own books. And I approached him, asking him, "Why are you doing so?" And then he said, "I have nothing else to do. So I brought my own school books, and I'm right now selling them to the public or to the people, because I really want to afford something for me and my family. I'm starving, as is my family." So when you're seeing that those children are selling their own books, and at the same time hoping that they can really get back to their schools, you can't really imagine it. I've reported in children for a very long time during the genocide, and there were two children just in the 5th grade, 11 years old, and they were having a makeshift stall where they were selling firewood. And then I did a story on them, and I asked them at that time, like, "Why are you doing so?" And they said, "Because we have nothing to eat, and we have to work, and we're forced to labor. Our families have been killed, and we are just in new friendship during the war, and we met during the genocide, and we decided to make this because we really want to live." So those children, when I asked them about their hopes or their dreams or their ultimate demand, it was very simple, that they wanted this genocide to end, and that they desperately desired to go back to their schools.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they did not go back to their schools. They didn't even go back to their homes, because their homes were destroyed, and they were beleaguered again by the Israeli military. So many children, a lot of children. This is also in addition to, the fact that over 20,000 children who have been killed in Gaza, all of them have been school students, and most of the children are right now displaced in hospitals. They don't have anything to do. Most of those students, this is a very important fact that people have to know. Most of those students have used their books for fire, to cook or to bake or something. So what does that mean for a child, a student, to burn his book just for the fire, to cook or to bake or to have some food? This is the reality that we can't say no to. And this is just probably two cases. These are just two cases in thousands, hundreds of thousands of cases, because what is happening right now is a holocaust where those children have no rights. You can't tell me that children can focus on education while you don't have the simplest rights, while they don't have food or water. Here in Ireland, one last thing, I'm seeing children going to the park every single day, playing football every single day, visiting restaurants, they're having their families, and they are going to the shops to buy whatever they want. So they have everything, and I'm seeing them complaining, while children in Gaza, they have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. They are bearing the unbearable. So we've got to be realistic, quite realistic, that you can't really tell those children. You can really distract them by education, but how can you really do that if they don't have the food, if they don't have the water? 96 of the water in Gaza right now is contaminated. I'm someone who was forced to leave as a sick student on a student visa just because of the malnutrition. I'm still talking to you while being malnourished and recuperating from malnutrition. And the last report I did in Gaza was on 4 children. One of them was with full body burns, the other was with a lung contusion, the other was with another injury to the back. Those children had nothing. The signs of malnutrition I saw at that time, just 3 weeks ago, was truly unbearable. So imagine what it is like right now. After 65 days, people have nothing to live. They're living in hell. And that is absolutely unacceptable, something that we need to work on. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Abu Bakr. And you're, as you mentioned there, you're only out week 3, and thank you so much. We understand how much it takes, how much energy it takes. As you say, you're just trying to build your own body up here, but to be reliving this experience, but it is really needed for us to know and to hear. And I suppose what we also need to remember is all our children went through COVID, so did the children in Palestine. And, so that's nearly 4 years of education that they have missed. And so look, thank you so much. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Dalia, if you're with us, please.
Yeah.
Hi, Habibti, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, Ahleen. Fault, shall we say, in Ireland. So Dalia, again, like Abu Bakr, very humble person, and has just asked me to keep it to these words, so I will. But I would encourage people to explore and read about the wonderful achievements of this beautiful young Palestinian that's come to us and is living in Kerry. Dalia is originally from Khan Yunis, and she's been in Ireland for just 7 months. And all of her family is back in Gaza. Over to you, Dalia. Thank you. Shukran.
Good afternoon, Magid. Assalamu alaikum, dear Eve. Good evening, everyone. We founded the Razan al-Najjar Bursary in memory of my cousin Razan, who was murdered by Israel in 2018. She was a 21-year-old volunteer paramedic when she was shot in the chest by a sniper while tending to the injured protesters during the Great March of Return. Her only weapons were her uniform and her hands. We created the bursary so that her name would live on through education, something she dreamed of but never had the chance to achieve. She wanted to be a nurse. Today, that dream continues through the female nurses the bursary supported, many of whom are now on the front lines saving lives as she once did. I'm not here today as a speaker or an educator. I'm here as a Palestinian, broken, grieving, and trying to carry the memory of Palestinians who deserve so much more. I want to say this plainly. I'm speaking to you today from a place of deep, deep pain and sorrow. These days, it feels like my entire existence has become a mission to revive the memory of family member Israel has murdered, to ensure their dreams are not buried with them. So everything I do is rooted in loss, in love, and in duty. Today, I want to share with you just one story about Ahmed, one of far too many. I'll share my screen now to show you a video, and the video you're about to watch is from May 2021. Ahmed was just 10 years old, and when he participated in an English language competition, and he talked about his dream to become a pilot. So I want you to hear his voice, meet him before I tell you his story.
My name's Ahmed Abdullah Najjar. I study at Khuza'a School, the fourth grade. Every person has a great aim that grows up with him since a childhood and works to achieve it. I would like to be a pilot, flying between the sky and the earth, piloting a plane from one country to another, flying over the seas, rivers, oceans, deserts, and mountains. So, the profession of pilot is beautiful and inspiring. It requires a lot of skills, the ability to focus, and the love of leadership. Pilot is responsible for the lives of travelers and for their safety. I will study and read up until I achieve my goal and be one of the most famous pilots in the world.
Israel killed Ahmed one day before his 14th birthday. But he wasn't just a dreamer. He was a child forced to become a man far too soon. He became what he described. He was responsible for the safety of his family instead of travelers. After his father was imprisoned by the Israeli military in early 2024, Ahmed stepped up. He became the protector of his mother and younger brothers, helping with everything from carrying supplies to comforting them during displacement and other horrors they lived through. On April 28th, just a few days ago, Ahmed went out on his bike to get food for his family. He carried a small bag of flour and a few cans. That's when an Israeli airstrike hit the street. He was critically wounded by shrapnel all over his body. Strangers rushed him to the hospital. Before he lost consciousness, he managed to whisper his full name. Doctors fought to save his life. He was rushed to the OR. They amputated one of his legs. But his small, fragile body couldn't withstand further surgeries. He remained on life support for 2 days. His brain was bleeding, and in a desperate attempt to stabilize him, people, starved and malnourished, themselves donated 10 units of blood for him. Prayers for a miracle surrounded him. But on April 30th, just last week, Ahmed passed, one day before his birthday. Before his murder, Ahmed wrote a will. He handed it to his 5-year-old brother and asked him to give it to his mama in case he died. Yes, we live in a world where 13 years old don't just understand death, but expects it as a fate. In his will, he told his family not to be sad. He said he loved them, and he asked them to take care of each other. Ahmed was the strongest of them all, as his mother says. She wrote, "You were worth 1,000,000 men, my son. You didn't live your childhood. You broke me. You lived and took my soul with you." She doesn't just grieve his loss, she grieves for the child he never had the chance to become. Ahmed is one name, one child, but he represents countless others. We cannot and will not forget them. Ahmed wanted to fly. He wanted to rise above the ground and the suffering that weighed him down. I share his story, not because it's unique, but because it isn't. Ahmed is one child among tens of thousands in Gaza who have been killed, orphaned, displaced, traumatized beyond words. And I was a student of Professor Rafat Al-Arir, a beloved poet and educator who was killed in December 2023. He taught us the power of storytelling, of naming, of refusing silence. That is why I'm speaking today, to honor him and all those we've lost. For the teachers listening today, you understand the responsibility of shaping minds. You decide whether the next generation learns to see Palestinians as human beings, not as statistics, not as a collateral damage, not as a distant issue, but as children like Ahmed and as families like mine. Tell their stories. Don't leave here tonight with only sadness. Leave with intention. Tell Ahmed's story. Share his dream. Demand more from a world that had failed him. Let their stories and let their stolen dreams call not for pity, not for silence, but for action. Ahmed wanted to fly, and he should have flown. Thank you. So we'll take 1 minute of silence now to remember and honor all the killed kids in Palestine and in Gaza. Michelle has a lamp of from Gaza, and she's lighting it in the memory of all the kids. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, Michelle.
Just,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
John.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Michelle. Just like I'm
Sure.
gonna tell Dalia just one thing very quickly. I'm very sorry for your narrating. My full solidarity. That is heartbreaking to hear. But you've got to know, if you know St. Kevin's Park in Dublin, I'm sure the Irish know it here. There's a memorial for your cousin. I'm not sure if you said she's your cousin, but for Razan al-Najjar in St. Kevin's Park. And it says that Razan al-Najjar was killed by the Israeli military during the march. So that was one of the greatest signs to see in Ireland. So if you go to St. Kevin's Park, there is a gate with different memorials. One of the memorials honors Anas Razan in 2018. And very important that you mentioned that there have been 40,000 children orphaned in Gaza, and the number is expected to rise. So if you go to St. Kevin's Park, I'm not sure where you are in Ireland, but if you go to St. Kevin's Park, if you go to the memorials, one of the memorials is for your cousin Razan al-Najjar.
Thanks, Abu Bakr. Yeah.
Thanks, you're welcome. You can see it will really uplift your spirits.
Thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, so I suppose that we just all take a breath for a moment, and I can see in everyone's faces. So Dalia, thank you. Shukran Kthir. Professor Walid Al-Mudali is going to speak next, and we have another, we're really honoured with our guests again tonight. The calibre of person that's about to speak to us now is a very accomplished man, both personally and academically. He's studied here in Europe and in the UK, as well as in Palestine. He's currently Professor of Political Science and International Relations at the Islamic University of Gaza. Founder, I'm going to just mention a few of his accolades, founder of the Institute for Strategic Studies. He has specialised in Israeli and Arab conflict, and he has been a commentator and a political analyst in media on the global stage. I'd like to welcome you, Dr. Walid, and he's going to speak specifically about third level education and the deliberate and intentional targeting of third level education. Thank you. You're muted, Dr. Walid.
Thank you, Michelle,
Dr.
for
Walid.
giving me this opportunity. Thank you all for what you have done for Palestine. Really, I'm very pleased to be with you this night. Thank you indeed. And thanks for Teachers for Palestine for organizing this event. I'm Walid Al-Mudali, a university professor from Gaza. I witnessed the brutal assault on Gaza firsthand. On the day the aggression began, I was on my way to the university, unaware that life as we knew it was about to be shattered. There is hardly enough time to space to recount the full weight of this harrowing experience, now stretching over one year and a half. But I will focus here on the specific impact the war has had on higher education in Gaza. Firstly, destruction of universities and educational institutions. 17 universities, as Abu Bakr said, we are the #1 in literacy. And this is the UN reports telling this fact. So education is not a privilege for Palestinians. It's a way of life. So 17 universities across the Gaza Strip were either partially or completely destroyed, including the Islamic University, Al-Azhar University, Al-Quds University, Al-Aqsa University, Al-Quds Open University, Palestine University, Al-Isra University, and others. In January 2024, or 2024, Israeli forces demolished the building of Al-Isra University after occupying it for 70 days as a military base. The destruction was total. Over 3,000 artifacts from universities' museum were lost. Prior to the latest ceasefire, Israeli airstrike also obliterated the university hospitals affiliated with the Islamic University. Second, targeting of educational infrastructure. According to multiple reports, more than 395 educational buildings, including universities, libraries, research centers, and printing facilities were either partly or completely destroyed, with damage exceeding $720 million. Approximately 70% of schools and higher education institutions in Gaza were rendered non-operational, paralyzing the educational process almost entirely. Third, loss of life and human capital in higher education. Over 4,000 students were killed, including more than 1,000 university students, and thousands more were injured. 105 university professors were murdered. More than 1,000 faculty members were arrested. At least 88,600 students lost an entire academic year. 4,829 university staff were denied their salaries. Both students and staff are now suffering from long-term trauma. The war has devastated the academic calendar, forced mass internal and external displacement, and left tens of thousands of students unable to continue their education. Fourth, use academic facilities for military purposes. In several instances, Israeli forces used university buildings as military sites, effectively turning them into targets. Like Al-Aqsa University is a stark example of this practice. From five-story house to a tent, I'm talking about myself. My own house was destroyed following the targeting of my neighborhoods and martyrdom of many of my neighbors. My family and I were forced to flee to displacement shelter in the Al-Mawasi area, specifically designated by the occupation itself. I went from living in a five-story house to residing in a tent, devoid of even the most basic necessities for a dignified life. This situation persisted for over 9 months. Life in a tent cannot be fully conveyed in words, but I can say in short that it strips one of their humanity and erodes every notion of dignity. This is but one dimension of the suffering. When combined with the systemic and repeated violence inflicted upon displaced person, the only accurate term to describe this situation is ethnic cleansing and genocide. It is hard to describe my feelings when I scroll through my phone and find hundreds of my colleagues and my students now martyrs. The educational process has come to a near complete halt in Gaza, reflecting the border paralysis of life. A few noble initiatives attempting to bridge the gap, such as repurposing bomb schools and setting up makeshift classrooms in displacement centers. But these too were targeted by Israeli strikes, killing and injuring school-aged children and teenagers. Attempts at distance education were also largely futile due to the absence of electricity, internet, digital devices, and basic security. These makeshift learning hubs once beacons of hope were repeatedly attacked, rendering even remote learning impossible. Tens of thousands of students remain without access to education. This breakdown did not start with the recent war. Over the past 2 decades, Israelis' cyclical assault, what their strategies term calling moving the grass, have disrupted every aspect of academic life and every aspect of life in general. These attacks are meant to weaken society, stifle resistance and systematically dismantle our intellectual foundation. The COVID-19 pandemic, which grabbed the world between the late 2019 and the mid 2023, also had a lasting negative impact on education in Gaza. The war, however, compounded this damage and made recovery nearly impossible. And yet, civil society organizations continued to organize educational tent and alternative classes in the face of destruction, many of which were bombed or dismantled. To date, over 16,000 children have been killed, an average of 27 per day. Sometimes maybe the number exceeds this numbers. More than 34,000 children have been injured. At least 39,000 children have been orphaned, having lost one or both parents. According to UN reports, approximately 70% of casualties in Gaza are women and children, underscoring the catastrophic toll this war has taken on the most vulnerable. At the end, this war has not merely destroyed buildings. It has waged war against knowledge, identity, and the right to dream. When education is deliberately targeted, the message is clear. The future itself is under attack. Yet, even under siege, the people of Gaza have not surrendered to despair. We teach intent. We write in the dark. We learn under fire. Education in Palestine, as I said earlier, is not a privilege. It is an act of defiance, a declaration of life in the face of death. Yes, they have raised our campuses, but they cannot raise our will. They have silenced our students, but they cannot erase their dreams. They have burned our books, but they cannot extinguish the flame of knowledge. Dear brothers and sisters, Gaza is being destroyed. Her women and children are starving. Her homes crashed with families inside. Silence today is betrayal. Neutrality is the face of such crime is complicity. Gaza now needs your support. So support Gaza with your words, your stance, your voice, your donation, your boycotts, your posts, and your prayers. Be the voice for those whose voices have been silenced and the living conscience in the world on the verge of losing its humanity. Gaza is not alone if we stand for truth and justice. Free, free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Walid al-Mujdali. The words, I think only one word to sum up, apocalyptic really is the state of destruction and the deliberate destruction of education in Palestine. But again, you end on a very, very hopeful note, and it shows once again the extraordinary resilience of the Palestinian people. And I wonder if you could just speak briefly about the UNRWA schools, Professor Walid, because they were very strategically brought under attack.
Yeah.
And Dalia here, many of the children here, many of the Palestinians we know, they've all been educated through UNRWA. Could you speak to that for a moment, please? I see some questions coming in about that.
Briefly, I can say that UNRWA school and the governmental school are targeted. So nowadays we cannot talk about school has been avoided from this destruction because destruction it's whether it's completely or partially. So you can't talk about any school, whether it's for UNRWA or governmental sector, part of this destruction. When we, as Palestinian, Gazian, when we see the destruction, we cannot believe, despite the fact that we are living in among the destruction. But when we see it by our eyes, we really we do not believe the fierceness and the mass destruction targeted in Gaza. Nothing there really. I'm living in Rafah. Rafah, you can say that Rafah now disappeared from existence because its schools, houses, medical centers, hospitals, all of them are targeted and demolished. And that means that we are talking about hundreds of thousands of children, of pupils, all out of any sort of education system. That's last for a very long time. As I said, not only this under this destruction and this attack, which lasts now for a year and a half, but I'm talking about the time before, about the COVID-19, which lasts for maybe about three years, and add to this, I mean, the battles between, or war between battles, or battle between wars, as they said. So you can talk about a very lasting destruction for our education system.
Shukran here, Professor Walid. The one little point I'd just like to make when you talked about the utter destruction too, Professor Walid, is the deliberate targeting at the very, very beginning of records, university records, so that people who were leaving Gaza at the time, actually, so you had pharmacy students who had done 2 years of pharmacy. Some of them were actually Palestinian Irish citizens, and they had to go right back and start at the beginning because that was intentionally targeted. So all those records would be gone. So it's yeah. Okay, so
let me add something. A professor at the university, I have my student, MA student, and graduate student. I meet them online and teach them, and I have many of them has their dissertation, etc. But you can imagine under such harsh condition, how can they manage? So I mean, there is no electricity, there is no internet, there is no safe environment for learning anything, and they take the responsibility of their families. Not only, as Abu Bakr said, the children has lots of responsibility right from the beginning of the day. They get up early to look for water. That's maybe 5 or 6 o'clock at the morning, and they do that for all the day, searching for water, for searching for something to eat, or sometimes helping their families or working at somebody's to feed their families, etc. So it's very, very hard time. If we know that the database, the libraries are all targeted and demolished. So it's very, very hard, really. I mean, the process is still there, but under a very hard condition.
So thank you so much. So just we'll move on to our next guest now. And our next guest is Jake from the Shan Vans. The Shan Vans are a newly formed Indigenous indie punk band. They're a 5-piece band that came together in 2023 and are made up of Irish speakers from West Belfast, whose bilingual decolonising rock music shines a light on the Irish language and on decolonisation in Ireland and around the world. The band is channeling the hopes and frustrations of working class Belfast youth, confronting the intergenerational trauma they've experienced growing up in a post-conflict society and using it as a catalyst for their work. And they released their debut track, Inside, in April 23. Since then, This Is Our Religion. I'm going to ask Jake to introduce the most recent song, which draws on parallels, very, very direct parallels between the Palestinian story of colonization and settler colonialism and the Irish story. So Jake, over to you. And Jake is going to specifically focus on, he was recently in the West Bank, and he's specifically going to focus on his eyewitness account of his time there. Thanks, Jake.
Thank you, Michelle. And thanks very much to Abu Bakr, Dalia and Walid. And I feel a wee bit of an imposter syndrome feeling here, following such really, truly inspiring speakers. And also just to say that I send my heartfelt condolences to you and to all your families. And I know condolences mean very little, and it's action is the dish of the day. And I suppose I'll speak a wee bit, maybe just very briefly, about myself and our band, and then I'll go on a wee bit and finish with the trip to Palestine, of which we were guests in this land for up to 10 days. But I am going to I'm going to share some of the screen at some point as well. But I suppose I'm from West Belfast. I grew up in Ballymurphy, and anybody who's familiar with the, I suppose, latest war in Ireland, 1969 to 1998, you'll be familiar with the Ballymurphy housing estate, which was, I suppose, in some way the heartland of Republican activism. All sorts of things happening when I was growing up in terms of tenants associations, women's groups, community festivals, and a real sense of togetherness and community, which is by and large over the last 10, 15 years sort of been decimated by, individualization of society, atomization, poverty, and all of these things are connected, I believe, to colonization. And I suppose that's kind of our entry point to, I suppose, forming a band and wanting to talk about that through music. So I suppose my personal story is I'm an Irish speaker. I went through nursery, primary and secondary level education, and I work full time as a community youth worker, training other youth workers on how to do what we're calling Indigenous youth work, which is youth work through the medium of Irish, and which is looking at all of the traditional elements of youth work as, I suppose, imposed on us by the education department here, but it's also using our own personal perspective to talk about identity and what it means to be Irish speakers in 2025 in the north of Ireland, where the language isn't even recognised as the national language of the island. So just to give you a wee glimpse into, I suppose, where I'm coming from, and I suppose why then potentially we're doing what we're doing. And I suppose then we could move on to Palestine fairly quickly. But could I just get a wee thumbs up from someone on the call? Can you see the share screen?
Yes.
Michelle, yep. Happy days. So just really briefly, this is the estate that I grew up in. I suppose what I'm showing you here is a very small housing estate. It's probably around about the same size as Silwan, which is a housing estate in East Jerusalem. We'll talk a wee bit about that later on. But I suppose what I'll direct you to here is the orange outline is the housing estate that I grew up in. And in that housing estate, we have a green circle here. That's the street that I grew up in. And the yellow dots that are dotted all around this map, they're basically military forts which were erected in 1969 and which stayed in place until 2003. So you've a highly militarized community. You've got British Army barracks, army training camps, police stations, and police training academies, all within a very small and very largely Irish nationalist, Republican, Catholic. I don't know how people want to describe it, but I suppose Belfast City's divided along sectarian lines. They're actually peace walls, they're called, but I suppose they're more like walls from the war, and they're designed, created, and built to keep the two major communities apart. So that's the context, I suppose, that I'm growing up in. This is a wee shot of my street. Just behind at the top right hand side of the street here, you'll see an army. This is the British Army, as they were occupying our community from 1969 until 2003. They would have had police escorts coming in and out of our street. So this was a daily occurrence. That's just photos of me and my cousin. We're just running along the backs of the house there. And this is a very common experience. It was something that when I visited Palestine, I got that sense, that feeling of fear, I think is what I can relate to as a child. These loud, angry men coming into your community in armoured cars. And I suppose that was my introduction to my first thought about what is colonization, what is occupation, and really having a home context for that. But my community has tried to resist for a long time. You know, the stereotypical point of view that's been put out there about people from West Belfast and you know, Irish people in general, and that association with terrorism and that association with violence. And just want to say that the island that we're living on has been colonised and occupied for centuries, with an intense colonisation project taking place in the north of Ireland, which has left, I suppose, a residual settler colonial community, who by and large refuse to adapt to anything regarding Irish culture, Irish language. And thankfully that's starting to change in recent years. We've all seen the headway that NECAP have made. And I suppose the context that we're coming from here is a community that has tried to resist mass incarceration, as I said, exploitation, exclusion, and I suppose just the photograph that it will focus on here now on screen. This guy lying down on the bed is actually a friend of my father's. My father was 17 years old when he was arrested. He was a member of Na Fianna, a Republican youth group who decided to try and defend their communities in 1969, just as the war was breaking out. My father ended up in jail and ended up learning the Irish language in jail. And this photograph you'll see right now is a photograph of two of his comrades from his wing, who were on the dirty protest, as it was called. It's known as the blanket protest or the no wash protest. And this was when all other avenues are shut regards democracy, and people decide to pick up arms and resist against colonial occupation, and then get put in jail and are called criminals. I suppose what they decided was, we're not going to stand for that. We aren't criminals. We're defending our community. We're under occupation. We have a right to do this. The Geneva Convention. And what you'll just see down in the bottom left-hand corner of this photograph is one section of the wall that was kept clean. This is actually human excrement that they spread around the wall in protest of the, I suppose, the conditions that were imposed on them, being called criminals and so on. They claimed prisoner of war status, and we're just talking about the value of education. Well, in the midst of this absolute chaotic scene that you're witnessing right now, there was space for the Irish language, and that was how they taught it. That was how they kept their resilience and their spirits high, was they simply did not rub excrement on one corner of the wall, and they used that corner to conduct Irish language lessons, which was about reclaiming their identity and your culture. And I suppose why that's relevant and why that is, I suppose, for me, a very inspirational thing to have done. Is because I'm now a result of that. There in 1969 there were no Irish language schools in the north of Ireland, and because of simultaneous activism that was happening inside and outside of the prisons, the Irish language became something, a matter of pride and a matter of dignity, and therefore people like my father, like the men in this cell, like the women in Armagh jail, decided to educate themselves about their own history, their own culture, and they came to an analysis that it was a colonial experience here in Ireland, and one way to begin to decolonise is to use language, and to use your language to reconnect with your land and your history. So just moving on then, I sort of adapted a lot of those values as a child, not knowing that I was doing that. And then in my adult life, I've tried to, as best I can, understand my own history and the history of Ireland, and then to try and build international connections and solidarity. So this photograph here is I suppose, a photograph of the art room slash art gallery slash music video scene that we had put together. So this was with contributions from over 120 global artists who had come together to use their own interests and skills and passion and energy to create something that would hopefully help raise awareness and educate people on the genocides that have happened throughout history at the arm and the long arm of empire, and the current genocide which is happening right now today in Gaza. And when people talk about what would I have done in 1933, what would I have done in 1935, well, what are you doing now? That's the question. Because I believe that most people through the propaganda model have been completely cut out of the truth, the news cycle, the things that we're seeing on our Instagram feeds every day. The journalists from Gaza, journalists like Abu Bakr, who are telling us what's going on, and all you have to do is look. So I suppose we looked and we saw, and we decided to write some music about it. And on the back of that music video, we got an invitation to Palestine. Myself, Anya, Conal, Stefan, and Tarlac, 5 Irish people, and we got to go and we got to witness and bear witness to what I can only describe as apartheid, occupation, and violent colonial settler, I suppose, control of the land. And that is a good starting point, I believe, for the trip to Gaza, or the trip to the West Bank. And what I would say is, coming back from the West Bank, there's certainly no case to be made at all that Gaza is, I suppose, with the genocide that's happening, it is the focal point currently. But I believe that this is obviously the time to acknowledge that if you look at Nablus, if you look at Jenin, if you look at Tulkarem, these are all cities in the West Bank which are currently being occupied and destroyed. Young people are being killed, journalists are being arrested, students are being arrested and killed, and we got to see and speak to family members of those living in those cities when we were in the West Bank. But we didn't have to venture too far outside of even Jerusalem just to see the apartheid in action. And I'll just show you a couple of photographs here. So we visited Silwan, again, a housing estate roughly around about the same size as Ballymurphy. And there was 2 standout moments in Silwan. The first of those moments were just on the right-hand side here. You'll see an archaeological site. In order for this archaeological site to be built, 18 families had to be directly moved out of this very small half a kilometre space. And they removed these families, charged the families for the demolition of their own homes, and done this because they believe that there may be some hidden archaeology under the ground, archaeological treasures of some kind under the ground. This is it's an example of, I suppose, just how ferocious the occupation and the Israeli Zionist control of Palestinian territories within the West Bank is so apparent just in these 2 photographs. The photograph on the left-hand side here is a house. It's the front garden of a house. We were inside what is now a makeshift porta cabin, which is housed at the back of the residence. And just above it here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but just on the top left-hand side of it, this is one Zionist settler family who have been purposely installed into the middle of a Palestinian community. and they fly Israeli flags from their homes. They build their homes at the top of complexes, and then on top of their homes, they're each given a patrol, an IDF patrol, who basically manage the occupation, essentially. So the residents can come and go as they please. They can fly flags, they can intimidate neighbours. And if any Palestinian neighbours decide that that's uncalled for and not warranted and unfair and discriminatory, and they try to address that, they'll be met with the full force of the IDF. This is happening in East Jerusalem. This is the front garden of, I suppose, Mr. Fakhri Abu Diab. Fakhri Abu Diab grew up in Silwan. He bought his house 35 years ago, and he's had his house demolished 3 times. So this is just my eyewitness account of what I had seen. I suppose we left the hotel on the first day, and this was the first trip. It was down into Silwan. We met a group called Eyewitness Silwan, and I would love for everybody to follow their Instagram page and to just check in and see that they're in the midst of all of this carnage and chaos, the beauty of which Walid spoke when he was speaking about his students and their their dignity and their thirst for knowledge and education. This is what the young people of Silwan are doing. They're organising and they're using art, and what they've done across the entire neighbourhood is they've painted the eyes of very famous people like Shireen Abu Akleh, who was murdered in 2022. It was actually Shireen's niece, Lorraine, who was our tour guide there. And I suppose what they're doing there is they're saying, look, we're not even allowed to erect our own CCTV or security within our own community so that we can capture some of this occupation and genocidal tactics firsthand and use as evidence. So they paint the eyes as a metaphoric and a symbolic way to show that what's happening in Silwan is being witnessed, and it's being witnessed by groups such as ourselves and other groups of, I suppose, international humanitarian activists who are going and finding absolute horrors actually everywhere. I'll not take us through every single day. I'll just take us through a few photographs here, and then I want to finish with a wee message of hope, hopefully. But what we had witnessed when we were in the hills of Bethlehem was this is Alice Cassia. She's a Christian Palestinian whose family own large swathes of land in the hills around Bethlehem, and she's actually in the middle of giving us a tour here. And 3 times throughout that tour, we were stopped by police. We were also harassed by settlers, excuse me. And this is, again, just an example of when the eyes of the world are focusing on Gaza because of the obvious need to do that right now. This is being, I suppose, exploited by the Zionist occupation and used as a way to just intensify their occupation in the West Bank. And there was a really, I think I'm right in saying that all 3 of our members are either connected with our former students of the UNRWA schools in Palestine. So just when we're focusing on education, we got to meet with the former director of communications in Gaza for UNRWA, who then, following his tenure there, moved on to the West Bank and became fulfilled a similar role, director of communications for UNRWA in the West Bank. And he explained to us, I suppose, very clearly and without any doubt that Gaza, the current, I suppose, escapade into Gaza, this is one of 5 wars in my lifetime that I can remember. There's probably been more beyond that, but I can remember, as early as 2009, 2014. I remember 2018, the Great March of Return, and I suppose the current war in Gaza. And I'm probably I'm not a student of history, so I'm probably missing a few things there. But I suppose the use of UNRWA as I suppose a social service provider throughout Palestine has been dealt a huge blow because of what has happened post October 7th, where there's been a direct attempt by the Zionist I suppose entity through its control of a lot of the Western media platforms to paint UNRWA as some sort of terrorist organization that doesn't deserve the, have a right to exist and doesn't deserve the funding that it gets. And we've seen in one fell swoop overnight that UNRWA, that funding was suspended and removed by some of the I suppose, some of the G8 countries. I know that the UK and Canada were one of those countries, or two of those countries, sorry, who removed the funding overnight without any investigation. And what the director of communications, former director, explained to us was this is the jewel in the crown. That within UNRWA, you have the only lifeline for Palestinians, refugees, regards education, social welfare, health, all of these sort of things we take for granted here in Ireland. That without UNRWA, these things simply wouldn't happen for the majority of Palestinians. And what there has been is a direct attempt since October 7th to delegitimize UNRWA, because they want to remove its ability to function, because in UNRWA is the framework, the legal framework for the right to return of Palestinians, which is how you're able to hold Israel to account as an occupying force. And I suppose that was the salient point for me, was coming away from that conversation. It was very clear that I needed to come home and tell people about this and help people understand, even in my own local context, in my organisation, in my community, in my family, that this is the attempted annihilation of a people. And this is exactly what we witnessed, what we've witnessed in the history books. And if we want to do something about it, we simply have to do something about it. We have to get creative about how we do that. And I suppose this photograph on the right-hand side is, I suppose, a demonstration of how one of the artists in Bethlehem, we travelled to Dar al-Khalima University in Bethlehem, which is an arts university. And I suppose, having heard and bore witness to the scholasticide that's happened over the last year and a half, I think it's 87% of education institutions in Gaza have been destroyed. My heart sinks at the thought that this could be coming to the Dar al-Khalima University very, very soon. And this, I suppose, this university and this beautiful but horrific piece of art in the photograph is of Hind Rajab. It was created for the memory of Hind Rajab, and there are 365 threads, each representing every bullet that passed through the vehicle in which she was desperately playing for her life. So in spite of all of the horrors, in spite of all of the, I suppose, parallels in Irish history and Palestinian history, in spite of all of that, I still remain positive. My band and my comrades, my friends, my colleagues in work, we are trying our best. We're trying our best to organise, but we have, I suppose, come to a conclusion that a lot of the marches, although great turnouts and fantastic representation for the Palestinian cause, we believe they've run their course, and we think that, and we heard this again from Palestinians in the West Bank, human rights officials, experts, who basically said, you in the West have a degree of privilege which is taken for granted. If we could organise, I suppose, in the way that you could potentially organise, we would be doing it, because our lives are on the line. And I suppose on that note, I want to say that there are many different ways to skin the cat. There are ways to express yourself individually as teachers in your conversations with your colleagues, with your students, with your family. There are ways to build networks and communities, just like this absolutely amazing example here that Michelle and Deirdre and everybody else who's involved in this has done. You know, a small group of dedicated, motivated, educated and inspired people who have, I suppose, a view of history which is not based in the propaganda model, the Sky News, the BBC, RTE, and they have simply pulled this together, and I think it's an amazing achievement. I can probably put myself out there and say it was probably difficult to get this put together. But the feeling of doing something for the Palestinian people, to me, it extends beyond the Palestinian people alone. We're fighting, I believe, for our humanity. And I believe that we are now on the cusp of potentially what seems to be the beginnings of a potential global war. Not to scare people into paralysis, but I believe that that's what's happening. And I think that Palestine is the litmus test for how the world will react. And I believe that that is the case. And I think that then very neatly passes the mantle to us, because people in Palestine are doing everything they can. People in the West Bank are organising, they're taking part in political activism, they're being suppressed, they're being repressed, they're being jailed, they're being murdered. And when Ireland hears these types of experiences, and if you're an Irish person and you have a bit of an analysis of the colonial history of our country, I think that we, more than anybody, have a duty. We also have a degree of privilege in that the majority of our country are considered part of the Western world. Yes, we have a degree of privilege that the rest of the world doesn't have, but we also have a history that the rest of Western Europe doesn't have. And in that history, and drawing those parallels, I think we can be very creative as educationalists as to how we sort of draw those parallels and make those things real. Because I suppose I'll just share one more anecdote. My history, or my journey into youth work, which is what I do, my journey into youth work was, I suppose, enhanced and enlightened through my journey, believe it or not, ironically, to Auschwitz on 2 occasions, where I was put on a youth course with 7 Catholics and 7 Protestants from the north, and 7 people from the 26 counties. And the 21 of us went on this learning journey for a year. And the culmination of that journey was a trip to Krakow, in which we went and visited the camps. And in that trip, I suppose I had seen enough, for me anyway. I had seen where hate and the hierarchy of hate and how it descends to genocide. It's all connected back to, I suppose, how we educate people about fear and about hate. And I think on that note, rather than bore you for any longer, I would just like to say that, look, I'm just a working class lad from Ballymurphy, just like the lads in Kneecap, just like your own children. And I feel like if we can do something, and we have a voice, and we can use that voice and be inspired by people like Walid and Abu Bakr and Dalia and the tens of thousands of other voices that are there to listen to if you want to go and listen to them. I believe that anybody can do it then. And I suppose on that note, I will just leave you with the question is, after this call, what are you going to do? Because I'm very sure of what we're going to be doing. And on that note, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Michelle for, again, lots of things, Michelle. Actually, even to take this opportunity to thank you publicly for all of your help in putting together the music video and the connections that you were able to make for us. Those connections have endured and have become friendships and have become actually activist networks. So on that note, it is possible and we don't have a choice. So thank you very much.
Jake, Jake, absolutely powerful. And we see a whole team of us here clapping. Mahu, Mabruk, we'd say. It's been so powerful tonight and it's really important for us to have Palestinian voices front and center. And you, I suppose, bringing to us that piece, which is very important. And you said it to yourself, while all eyes are on Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank, that is a really important piece for us to hear. Before October 7th, the biggest land grab ever, had happened, and I think, you've spoken about so much there. You got so much into that session. Thank you, Jake. But it's so important for us, I suppose, to use the correct language, the language of racism, discrimination, occupation, apartheid, and not be afraid to use that language because it is what it is. All the UN resolutions broken, including the wall, the illegal surveillance, profiling, they're all human rights violations. And on our poster, we have a little subtitle that says, stand up and speak out. And I love how you ended the session, Jake, asking, what are you going to do? That is a really good question. because we are one mighty tribe. Here in Teachers for Palestine, and it's a sentence I got from one of our activist colleagues, Conal. He said, "We're just human beings of conscience. We're just ordinary people watching absolute horror. And it keeps getting worse, and we can't imagine that it could get worse. And the level of depravity and evil is just beyond what any of us ever could have imagined." And I suppose you also mentioned something, which was a piece I was going to end with tonight. If you ever wondered what you would have done during the Holocaust, if you'd ever wondered what you'd have done through apartheid South Africa, you're doing it right now. And, Nelson Mandela was considered and categorized a terrorist. So we just need to remember our history, and just remember, I suppose, and I would like to just acknowledge Jews all over the world that have stood up and said, not ever, not in our name, not now, not ever again. And just I'm going to pass it to Andrew briefly and to remind everybody when Jake mentioned, what are you going to do? Tomorrow night we have an amazing lecture from Salah Hijazi, who's policy coordinator with the Boycott, Divest, Sanctions National Committee. And it'll be a really great, informative lecture. So please do join us at 8 again tomorrow. Over to you, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I don't have much to add. We are way over time, but I think it's really important that we did go over time because so many really important guests who have had so much really important information for us to take on board and to process. So thank you to all of them. Jake, you were far from boring. Your sentiments on the West Bank absolutely echo mine from when I was there, and it's one of the reasons that a lot of us here set up this group. And I think the reason for Teachers for Palestine is because when we were in schools after, October 7th and onwards, we were astounded by the staff rooms, actually, not the students, the staff rooms, when we were talking about, did you see that in the news last night? Isn't it terrible? And a lot of teachers were eating their lunch, staring into their lunchbox and not saying anything. And it's they just think that it's just complicated and that they don't really know anything about it. But that's systematic. That is because they have never been taught about it in school. They've never been taught about it at primary school, at secondary school, and it's just systematic. And the reason that the current attack on Gaza is allowed to prolong and to get to the stage it is because it's not the first attack. They've done this over and over and over and over and over again, and not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank and across the entirety of Palestine. And they're getting away with it because it's complicated. That is the education of the Western world about what's happening. Now, I'm not excusing for 1 second what's going on now. People now, because it's live on our screens, should be absolutely outraged and should be doing everything in their power to stop it. But I think our goal for Teachers for Palestine is longer term than that. Our goal is education, and our goal is from primary school to start educating about the beauty of Palestine. First of all, that there is a country called Palestine, that it's beautiful. Here's their culture, here's their people, here's what their dance is like, here's what their food is like. Because let's face it, they're trying to erase Palestine from the map, and we have to put it through our education system firmly on that map. And there is a country called Palestine. Second level, then we talk about occupation, we talk about the apartheid, we talk about all of those things. And I suppose the message that we want teachers to take from is we've created a bank of resources, and this is difficult. You've never thought about this before. You're probably learning about Palestine now and about the complexities, non-complexities of the situation. And you're wondering where to start. Well, my recommendation to teachers is to start small. You don't have to go out there all week and blast every single class with this if you've never done it before. Some teachers are. Some teachers are taking their students to protests today. I saw at the Dáil, there was 3 or 4 secondary school classes at the protest in the Dáil today. Their teachers are taking them. Some are showing them all the videos, movies about Palestine, etc., etc. But if you're not there yet, we're not asking that you do that. We're just asking that you start, that you look at the resources that are there, that you start with something really simple. And we know people are not born confident, and teachers are not born confident. It's built. So start small, and then the resources are always there. It doesn't have to be done this week. You can do it next week. You can do it in September. You can do it from now on in your teaching. You can look at what you're teaching in the curriculum and you can say, well, could I use Palestine in here somewhere? Could I talk about the situation in Palestine somewhere here? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to introduce it slowly, but it does take bravery to do that. And we're saying that we need teachers now to be brave and to go outside your comfort zone and to look at the resources and to make a start. Absolutely, if you can bring 2 or 3 classes into protests to help stop this current genocide and attack, that is amazing. But if you're not there yet, if you don't have the support of your colleagues, if you don't have the support of principals, if you don't have the support of your school to do that, at least you can be brave within your own class. You don't need the principal's support for that. You don't need your colleagues' support for that. You can start in your own lessons by looking at the resources that are there and using them in your lessons. And I would ask that use the opportunity or the excuse, if you want, of this Let's Talk About Palestine week to do that and to make a start. And that is... that in itself, that you think is something nothing and it's only small, it's only my little first year group after lunch, that's revolutionary. And it really is. That is revolutionary, starting on that path, and it makes a huge, huge difference. So that's what we would ask teachers to do and use this week for. So again, I'd like to thank all our guests, Walid, Dalia, Abu Bakr and Jake. It was amazing to hear from you all, and thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And to all those watching, if you can, I sound like an advertisement here, but if you can like and subscribe this video, and if you can comment below, that's what how the algorithm works. That's how this video gets further reach. Probably should have done that at the start of the video, but we may do in the edits afterwards. But thank you so much to everybody, yeah, it was an honor to have you. Thank you.